Only Allah knows why they did it. And I guess Allah decided to punish Turkish leaders by making them lose their mind.
We will not forget this aiding of terrorism. We have always considered and will always consider treason the worst and most shameful act. And let those in Turkey who shot our pilots in the back know that.
The feud deepens between Russia and Turkey. Last week, Turkey shot down the Russian fighter jet that Turkey claimed violated their airspace. Yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed Turkey's leadership was deranged and accused them of helping fund ISIS through the transfer of oil over the Syrian border into Turkey. Turkish leaders quickly retorted and said Putin's statements were Soviet-style propaganda. This all comes as Ash Carter, the United States Secretary of Defense, has been urging Turkey to do more to secure their borders and help in the fight against ISIS. Joining me now to discuss the rising tensions between Turkey and Russia and Turkey's role in the fight to defeat ISIS is former diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, welcome back.
Hi, Liz.
Putin seemed to have pretty hard evidence that the Turkish president was making a fortune buying oil from ISIS. How credible is Putin's statement, in your opinion?
Oh, I think the statement is quite credible, and I think the evidence that the Russians presented about the flow of oil being exported by ISIS through Turkey is irrefutable. Let's face it, the real tipping point appropriate for this show is whether or not that border between Turkey and Syria actually gets closed. But I think this exposes a major contradiction in Western policy toward ISIS and toward the Islamic radicals in Syria, is that we have countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia, who are supposed to be our allies, who are essentially on the other side, who are supporting the jihadists in Syria.
Now, Turkey is a NATO ally, but like you said, they don't seem to be doing much to secure the 500 miles of border they share with Syria. Why aren't they doing that?
Because they have two fundamental goals in Syria. One is to overthrow the Assad government in Damascus. The other one is to prevent any kind of Kurdish entity from coming into existence on the Syrian side of the border. For them, ISIS and the other jihadist groups are essentially more allies than they are enemies. So it's absurd for President Obama and American policymakers to be pointing at Turkey as an ally here when President Erdogan sees his country's interests as very much on the other side.
So you do not expect Turkey to do anything about these 500 miles of unsecured borders?
Yes, I expect them to work very hard to keep that border open and to make sure that the terrorists can transit in and out of Turkey, and that ISIS and the other jihadist groups are able to maintain themselves as a significant force inside Turkey. And that's where you really get a disconnect between Western and Russian policy. Russian policy is very straightforward. Keep the government in Damascus in power, defeat and kill the jihadists, and protect the Christians in Syria who are being protected by the Syrian government and who are being threatened by the jihadists being funded and armed by Western governments and by the Saudis and the Turks.
Will NATO do anything about that? If it really is what it seems like it is, then Turkey's essentially aiding ISIS. They're giving them money by purchasing oil, allowing their border to be open. Will NATO step up and do anything?
You know, it's a very good question. What should NATO do in this instance? Supposedly, NATO is a defensive alliance. And of course, Erdogan has been pleading that, oh, you have to defend us from the mean Russians, Article 5 and so forth, when in fact, nobody is threatening Turkey's territory. It's Turkey that's committing aggression in Syria. So there's really not a role for NATO with respect to defending Turkey. The question is whether Turkey is really an ally of the United States. That's one reason, by the way, that there's now a petition pending on the White House website to say that we should break our NATO alliance with Turkey and that Turkey should be designated as state sponsor of terrorism.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have a point if this is in fact true. I'm not sure how we exactly prove that this is happening. Do you know the actual proof that this is occurring?
Well, as I say, as far as the oil, I think the Russian proof is dispositive. These are not the kind of cartoons we've seen, unfortunately, from some Western governments with respect to, for example, Ukraine. This was clear satellite imagery of lines of truck crossing into Turkish territory that simply, there's no way the Turks could not know about this and be complicit with this. As far as other aid for the jihadists in Turkey, there's many records. You can find them anywhere in the media of terrorists who have gone in and out of Syria, always through Turkey. There's simply no question about this, Liz.
Right. Now, besides this, there have been mounting tensions between Turkey and Russia because of the jet that Turkey shot down. Russia was obviously very angry about that. What was your reaction to that incident?
I think it was a provocation by Turkey to try to bust up what was happening after Paris, where more and more Western countries were saying we need to be working together with the Russians against the common enemy, which is ISIS, which of course is Turkey's ally, that they wanted to try to bust that up. And I think the really treacherous thing was that it's quite clear that the Turks made use of information from the U.S.-led command center on the anti-ISIS coalition that the Russians had given them the coordinates of the jets. They had informed the United States this is where their jet would be operating and their operations it would be conducting, and then that information was passed to the Turks, and the Turks then used it to ambush the Russian plane, killing one of the two-man crew and then also killing another Marine on a helicopter on a rescue mission that was shot down with a U.S.-made, U.S.-supplied tow missile given to one of these moderate jihadist groups.
Which just brings us back to that question again of whether Turkey should be part of NATO given their actions here. But in your opinion, which country was in the wrong then? Russia for violating Turkey's airspace because they are said to have done that and ignored the warnings from Turkey, or like you said, was Turkey trying to provoke and overreacted?
There's no question that Turkey was in the wrong. It wasn't an overreaction. It was a deliberate ambush, even if the Russian plane had crossed into Turkish territory. And I'm not convinced that that's the case. There's simply no grounds for shooting down a plane under those circumstances. Look, Turkish planes violate Greece's borders 3 or 4 times a day. And the Greeks don't shoot them down. Turkish planes violate Syria's border all the time. One was shot down by Syria some months ago, and President Erdogan personally pointed out that a brief violation of another country's airspace is no grounds for shooting down a plane. At that point, he was right. He's changed his tune now, of course.
Do you expect any retaliation from Russia? Putin said nobody will get away with hurting his people, but he also said that Turkey is not going to receive the response that they were trying to provoke. What do you expect from Russia?
I think their response will be very calculated and very measured, and I don't know that they will necessarily be the right packages of responses, that they have retaliated against some Turkish agricultural imports into Russia, about Russian tourists going to Turkey. It's a big popular tourist destination, which is unfortunate, by the way, because the places they go are not President Erdogan's home territory within Turkey. So the people there are not necessarily the people that Russia wants to inconvenience. But he really has made this personal, not only attacking President Erdogan personally over these oil exports, but his son, Bilal Erdogan, whom he is accused of personally profiting from this oil trade.
All right, let's change topics just for a moment. We're almost out of time. But the UK just announced that they will participate in airstrikes now in Syria to fight ISIS. In your opinion, will this help defeat ISIS?
No, not at all. I think the Turks, the British will be a marginal addition to any kind of anti-ISIS coalition. The really only important games in town are the United States and Russia, and we'll see whether or not the Obama administration can get away from our absurd policy of saying we have to fight against both Assad and ISIS, which makes no sense. Who then is going to take power in Damascus? If Assad goes down, some flavor of terrorists, some flavor of jihadists would take power. And that's why I think you see more and more American presidential candidates, notably Ted Cruz, moving away from the idea that overthrowing Assad is a good idea. We saw what happened in Libya. We don't need to repeat this in Syria.
Jim, always great to have you on the program. I appreciate it. Still ahead, the Palestinians are propagating more propaganda about Israelis eating Palestinian blood in their bread. More details next.